The plastic container was empty, but the promise made over it was worth $800 million. Nia, 9 years old with neat braids and a heart too big for her rundown neighborhood, saw the boy in the torn hoodie through the rusted fence. Her family had almost nothing, but she pushed her own dinner through the wire anyway, every single evening for 6 months. No one told her to. No one thanked her. She just saw a broken boy and decided he deserved to eat. When the foster system finally came to take him away, Lucas made a desperate, wild vow. "I'll marry you when I'm rich." Nia simply smiled, pressed the plastic lid of her container into his hand as a keepsake, and watched him disappear. 20 years vanished. Lucas became a billionaire real estate mogul, a man who built an empire of steel and glass but lived in a tomb of a penthouse. He spent a decade hiring the best investigators money could buy to find that girl, but found only silence. Tonight, he would walk into a volatile neighborhood town hall to crush the opposition to his latest project. Nia Carter would be there, standing at the front of the crowd with that same quietly strong posture. Neither of them knew they were seconds away from a collision 20 years in the making. Lucas Reed stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office at 5:30 p.m. The city below was a grid of lights and shadows. He didn't see the beauty. He only saw the math. His $5,000 watch ticked in the silence of a room that held no photos, no memories. Only a high-tech safe behind his desk. Inside that safe wasn't gold or documents. It was a stained, scratched plastic lid. The only thing that proved he was once human. The city was 60 stories down. From up here it didn't look like much, just lights and grids, the occasional red tail of a car sliding between buildings. Lucas Reed stood at the window with his hands in his pockets, his reflection barely visible against the glass. 32 years old. He'd built enough to fill a skyline and still couldn't sleep past 4 in the morning. The office was quiet. Always quiet. His assistants had stopped trying to decorate it after the 3rd time he'd cleared the shelves. No pictures, no awards mounted on walls. Just the desk, the chairs, and the marble floor that cost more per square foot than most people's rent. He stood there until the sun was gone. Then he walked to the far wall. The panel opened with a press of his thumb. Behind it sat a biometric safe, the kind of thing banks used. Inside it, no bearer bonds, no watches, no cash. Just a plastic food container, cloudy with age, its blue lid slightly warped. The sides were stained a deep rust orange from years of tomato sauce. One corner had been scraped raw, probably against concrete. He picked it up with both hands. The smell of the room, leather and recycled air, didn't change. But something in his chest did. He was 9 years old again, fingers going white in the cold, standing by a chain-link fence with his hood pulled up and his stomach completely empty. And a girl on the other side of that fence, pushing her lunch container through the gap without saying a word. Just handing it over like it was nothing. Like he was worth feeding. He never found out where she went. He'd tried, in the way men with money try, quietly through intermediaries, with results that never came back clean. She was just gone. The neighborhood swallowed her, or the years did. Every building he'd put up since then had been a version of the same question asked in steel and concrete. Downstairs, his board was waiting. They wanted to talk about the redevelopment, 40 blocks, cleared and rebuilt, the kind of project that got your name on a terminal or an arena. Profitable. Clean. The numbers were good. They were very good. Lucas set the container back in the safe and pressed the door shut. He took the elevator down. He wasn't going to kill the project. He was going to walk those 40 blocks himself. First, the way he should have done months ago. And if there was still a chance to do it differently, to build something that left room for the people already there, he was going to find it. He owed someone a lunch. 20 years of interest had made it into something larger than he knew how to carry. The wind in the heights had teeth. It came off the street smelling of wet asphalt and diesel, and it found every gap in a hoodie, every exposed inch of skin. Lucas was 12. He sat with his back to the chain link, knees pulled up, hood cinched as tight as it would go. Not sleeping. Just still. He'd learned that stillness made him harder to see. He heard her before he saw her. Sneakers on broken pavement. That particular dragon step that meant someone wasn't in a hurry. He didn't look up when the shadow crossed him. Nia Carter. She lived in the brick building across the alley. The one whose window boxes somehow still had flowers in them. Her braids today ended in yellow beads. She was in his grade, but might as well have been from a different country. She didn't say anything. She just crouched on the other side of the fence and unzipped her bag. The container was translucent plastic with a blue lid that didn't match. Through the side he could see Spanish rice, still steaming, and a chicken thigh that had gone dark at the edges from the pan. He had watched her mother hand her that same bag at the bus stop an hour ago. "I'm not hungry today," Nia said. She didn't look at him when she said it. She was matter-of-fact about it, like she was reporting weather. Lucas's stomach answered before he could. The growl was loud enough that she would have heard it. He looked at the container, then at her. His voice came out rougher than he intended, thin from not being used much. "I don't have anything to give you back." "I know." She found the gap where the fence had pulled away from the post and worked the container through. The plastic dragged against the concrete with a short, flat scrape. He didn't reach for it right away. "My mom says the world's too big to be hungry alone," Nia said, like that settled it. He picked it up. The warmth went straight through his hands. He peeled the lid back and ate, and she stayed, sat down on the pavement on her side of the fence, back against the wire, not watching him, just there. She didn't say anything else. She didn't make it into a thing. He finished everything. He put the lid back on and set the container down near the gap. She was still there. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything either. But he stopped being tense. His shoulders came down. The morning went on around them. Pigeons, a truck backing up somewhere, somebody's radio. And for a while Lucas just sat in it. 3 black SUVs came down the street one after another, too wide for the lane, and stopped in a line in front of the community center. The building was old brick, the kind that had been patched so many times the patches had patches. When the car doors opened, cold air tumbled out and dissolved fast in the summer heat. Lucas Reed stepped onto the sidewalk. His shoes hit grit. He looked up the street toward the tower with his name on it, then back at the building in front of him. He'd worn the suit deliberately. Charcoal wool, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He told himself it was armor. He'd been telling himself that for years. There were maybe 40 people between him and the entrance. They weren't milling around. They were planted. And at the center of them was a woman with a megaphone held at her side, braids shot through with gray, standing the way people stand when they've been standing their ground for a long time. She didn't raise the megaphone. "Mr. Reed." Her voice carried on its own, clear and level. It went straight through him. "You can bring all the steel you want. You won't find one person in this zip code signing over their home for a condo they can't afford." Lucas stopped. 10 feet between them. Up close, the years were visible. The gray, the lines at the corners of her eyes. But her eyes themselves were exactly the same. Sharp and completely unmoved by him. She was looking at a developer. A threat in a good suit. She wasn't looking at a boy who once sat in the dirt with his back to a chain-link fence. She didn't know. Of course she didn't know. "Ms. Carter," he said. His own voice felt off. The boardroom tone was gone and nothing had replaced it. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm here about what comes next." Nia stepped forward. She studied his face the way you study a document you don't trust. "Progress," she said flatly. "That's what they always call it when they want to knock something down and stop feeling bad about it. Some of us remember what was here before it became a project on somebody's slide deck." She paused. "You grew up somewhere. Does any of this look familiar to you?" He felt it then. The specific weight and warmth of a plastic container, the steam off Spanish rice, the sound of a lid dragged through a gap in a fence. It lasted less than a second. The cameras were running. His board members were behind tinted glass watching. He had prepared remarks, a community investment framework, a PR team on standby. He said none of it. "It looks very familiar," Lucas said. Nia watched him. Something shifted in her expression. Not recognition, not yet. Just a question she hadn't asked out loud. The distance between them was 10 feet. It had also been 20 years and a great deal of money. None of those things were the same as the fence, but they worked the same way. The community center smelled like floor wax and old paper. Lucas sat across from Nia at a scarred oak table, hands folded, back straight. The posture he used in boardrooms when he wanted to look calm. Behind her, a hand-drawn map of the neighborhood covered most of the wall, pinned with photographs. Faces mostly. Some he half recognized. Nia had the architectural surveys he'd sent overspread in front of her, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at him. "You look at these blocks and you see square footage," she said. The megaphone voice was gone. This was quieter and worse. But these buildings are the only record some people have that they existed. You see that corner? She pointed without turning. That's where the first library for black children in this neighborhood stood, because the city wouldn't build one. That alley there, a woman named Mrs. Gable ran a soup kitchen out of her window during the '98 strike. Out of her own window with her own food. Lucas kept his face level. History matters, Ms. Carter. I'm not disputing that. But the pipes in these buildings are failing. The wiring is a genuine fire risk. What I'm offering is infrastructure that actually works. Safety sounds different when you've never had a place to sleep, Nia said. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. You talk about fire hazards. You don't talk about what it means to have somewhere warm. What it means when a neighbor leaves a light on for you. She stopped. Her eyes moved to the window. Outside, the chain-link fence along the vacant lot caught the afternoon light, rust orange and sagging in the middle. Something changed in her face. Not much. Just a softening around the eyes. There was a boy, she said. Right out there, actually. He used to sit by that fence. 12, maybe 13. He didn't talk much. Just watched everything like he was waiting for it to go wrong. My parents weren't comfortable by any stretch, but they saw him through my eyes. They pulled double shifts some weeks, just so I'd have enough to bring him something. They told me if you walk past the people the world's already decided to forget, you become part of the forgetting. She paused. He told me once he'd come back and marry me when he had money. A short, dry laugh. I don't even remember his name. The state moved him before winter. But I kept thinking about him for years. Kept hoping he landed somewhere decent. Her eyes came back to Lucas. I look at you, all of this, the SUVs, the lawyers, the project plans, and I think about that boy. And I wonder if he turned out like you, if he came back here with all that behind him, would he even recognize what he was about to knock down? Would he remember why the fence mattered? The room was very quiet. Lucas looked down at his hands. The suit felt wrong in a way it hadn't when he'd put it on that morning. He wanted to say his name. He wanted to tell her about the safe, about the container inside it, about the fact that he had never once stopped trying to find her. But the distance between the boy in the dirt and the man at this table was real, and he didn't know yet if it could be crossed by just saying so. Maybe he wouldn't recognize it, Lucas said. His voice came out rough. Maybe he's still just trying to figure out how to pay you back. Nia looked at him for a long moment. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't look away either. The boardroom was on the 58th floor. On clear days, you could see 3 counties. Lucas sat at the head of the table and looked out at the sky and felt, for the first time in recent memory, like the window was facing the wrong direction. Harold dropped a tablet on the table hard enough to slide. The screen showed the project's delay metrics in red. We're bleeding $300,000 a day in interest alone, he said. The permits are signed. The police are available. We've offered those residents relocation packages that exceed anything they'd save in 10 years of work. At some point you have to stop doing the hometown narrative and start running this company. Lucas looked at the numbers on the screen without really reading them. He kept coming back to the way Nia had stood in front of that building. The way she'd said some of us still remember the stories in these walls. Not performing it, just saying it, like it was obvious. If we force them out, Lucas said, we become the story. Every outlet from here to the coast runs it for a week. That's not a PR problem, it's a valuation problem. Sentiment doesn't pour foundations, another board member said, leaning in. We have a legal and fiduciary obligation to our investors. If you can't sign the enforcement order by 5, the board will need to revisit your position. You weren't brought to the top of this company because you had feelings, Lucas. You were brought here because you were the best cold red in the room. We'd like that person back. The room felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Lucas had worn this suit, sat in this chair, made harder calls than this one. He'd told himself for 20 years that being unsentimental was a skill he'd earned the hard way, that it had kept him moving when moving was the only option, that it had built everything around him. The eviction order sat in front of him. One signature. The demolition crew was already scheduled. The architect's renders were framed in the hallway outside. He looked at the paper and thought about the specific block it referred to, the fence along the vacant lot, the gap where the wire had pulled away from the post. I need an hour, he said, and stood up. His chair scraped the marble. 40 minutes, Harold said. After that we call a vote. Don't do something you spent 30 years working against, Lucas. Don't throw this away over a few condemned buildings. Lucas left without answering. He walked to the private elevator and wrote it down, not to his office but to the floor with the safe. He needed a minute with the container. He needed the weight of it in his hands and whatever it still carried. The cold, the fence, the steam off the rice, the fact that someone had once decided he was worth feeding when there was no angle in it for her at all. The elevator dropped fast. He had $800 million. He'd always thought of it as the finish line, the proof that the boy by the fence had made it far enough. But standing in the small steel box between floors, he understood it differently. It wasn't a prize. It was leverage. The only question was what he was willing to use it for. Above him, the board was checking their watches. Below him, Nia was still in that building. The elevator opened. Outside, sirens. The low idle of heavy engines somewhere around the corner. Inside the community center, the overhead lights buzzed and the coffee on the side table had gone cold an hour ago. Nia sat at the oak table with her arms crossed, not asleep, not quite present. When the door opened, she looked up, ready for a lawyer or a police liaison or someone with a clipboard. Lucas came in alone. No jacket, sleeves pushed up, nothing in his hands except a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. He looked like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. "If you're here to give us the timeline," Nia said, "we already know. We can hear the trucks." He didn't answer. He walked to the table and stood across from her and set the object down. He folded back the handkerchief slowly, corner by corner, until the plastic container was sitting on the scarred wood between them. Translucent sides, blue lid. The lid was warped slightly at one edge, the plastic clouded with age. A hairline scratch running across the top from where it had once dragged against concrete. Nia went still. She stared at it, her arms unfolded. One hand moved across the table on its own, and her fingers rested on the lid, not picking it up, just touching it. She knew the scratch. She knew the particular way the lid didn't sit quite flush on one side. She had held this exact container 1,000 mornings in her memory without meaning to. "I told you I didn't have anything to give back," Lucas said. His voice was unsteady. "You said the world was too big to be hungry alone." She looked up at him. She took her time. The jaw, the haircut, the expensive watch. She moved past all of it and found his eyes. She'd spent 20 years occasionally wondering about a boy whose name she'd half forgotten. She was looking at him now. "Lucas," she said. Not a question exactly. "I kept it." He pulled out the chair and sat down, and the composure he'd carried into every room for 2 decades was just gone. "Every office, every city, every country. I kept it in a safe. A real safe, the kind you'd put something valuable in. Because it was. It was the only thing I had for a long time that proved someone had looked at me and decided I was worth something." He stopped, steadied himself. "I built everything because I thought that was the answer. I thought if I could get high enough, loud enough, big enough, eventually it would count as paying you back." Nia stood up. She walked around the table and stopped in front of him and put her hand against his face the way you'd check if someone had a fever. Careful, direct. He was thinner in the face than she'd expected, tired in a way the suit had hidden. "You came back," she said. "I'm here." He put his hand over hers and held it there. "And I'm not signing it. The order, I'm not signing it. I've got the money and I've got the lawyers, and I'm going to use both of them to do this differently. Properly. That's what I came to tell you." Outside, an engine revved. Someone on a radio. The sounds of a plan still in motion, not yet called off. Inside, neither of them moved for a moment. The container sat on the table between them, warped lid and all, having outlasted everything that had tried to replace it. Lucas dropped his hand from hers. He looked at the container on the table and then at the floor, and for a moment he couldn't find anything to say that didn't sound like a speech. "I thought I was just taking from you," he finally said. "I thought you were skipping your own lunch to keep some kid from starving. I wanted to come back and fix that. Build something big enough that it would cancel it out." Nia shook her head. Her braids swayed and the beads clicked once softly. "It wasn't just me." She said it plainly, not unkindly. "You think a 12-year-old hides a missing lunch every day for months without her parents knowing? My mother counted every portion in that pot. She knew exactly where the rice was going." Lucas looked at her. "They saw you through the kitchen window," Nia said, "sitting against that fence. My father started picking up double shifts at the garment factory on Paulson Street, so there'd be enough in the house for me to keep bringing you something. He'd come home at 3 in the morning gray in the face, and still make sure the pantry was stocked." She let that sit for a second. The woman at the corner store. You remember it, the one with the green awning. She stopped charging me for the extra fruit. Just stopped, didn't say anything about it. The man at the bakery gave me day-old bread for free because he knew where it was going. Nobody made an announcement. Nobody asked for anything. She turned toward the window. Outside, the neighborhood sat the way it always had. Brick buildings patched over their own history, storefronts with hand-lettered signs, the fence along the vacant lot still sagging in the middle. This is what you've got on your maps as blight, she said. These are the people you've categorized as an obstacle. But this neighborhood is why you're standing here right now. You weren't kept alive by one girl who felt sorry for you. You were kept alive by a community that looked at a kid nobody was claiming and decided that wasn't acceptable. Lucas turned to the map on the wall. He'd studied versions of it for months. Parcels, square footage, assessed values, demolition phases. He knew the grid of it cold. But he was looking at the photographs pinned around the edges now. Faces he didn't know, and a few he almost did. He had spent 15 years telling the story of himself as someone who had come from nothing and built everything through will and intelligence and appetite. He'd given that speech at conferences. He'd believed it. But Nia's father had worked nights at a garment factory. A woman with a green awning had adjusted her books. A baker had set aside bread he could have sold. None of them had ever sent a bill. I didn't just make a promise to you, Lucas said. He was still looking at the map. I owe everything I built to people who never asked me for anything and never will. Outside, the lights from the police vehicles threw blue and red across the walls in slow rotations. His phone had buzzed 6 times in the last 20 minutes. Harold would be standing at the head of the boardroom table right now, arms crossed, watching the clock. Lucas looked at Nia. Then he took his phone out of his pocket and pulled up Harold's number. I'm going to need you to send everyone home, he said when it picked up. The order isn't getting signed. We're going back to the architects. He listened for a moment. Then call a vote. That's fine. He ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. Nia watched him. She hadn't moved. It won't be fast, Lucas said. And it probably won't be clean. But I'm not tearing this down. The police lights were still going out front. Lucas didn't wait to see what the board decided. He picked up the container from the table, wrapped it back in the handkerchief, and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Nia and nodded toward the back door. They went out through the alley. Nobody followed them. The cameras were all on the front of the building, waiting for something to happen that wasn't going to happen anymore. They walked without talking. Lucas knew the streets well enough that he didn't have to think about where his feet were going, which surprised him. He'd told himself for years that he'd moved on from this place, that he carried it only as abstraction, a origin story, a source of drive. But his feet knew every turn. He stopped at a stretch of fence along the vacant lot. Ivy had come up through the chain link and rusted it into something almost unrecognizable. The concrete at the base was cracked in a long diagonal line he remembered staring at for hours, 20 years ago, when staring at concrete was what you did when you had nowhere to be and nothing to eat. He put his hand on the wire. It was cold, same as always. I used to sit right here, he said. I'd look at the gaps in this fence and think everything on the other side was for somebody else. Nia stood next to him, hands in her jacket pockets. She looked at the fence, then at him. Every day you walked away, I thought that was it, Lucas said. That you wouldn't come back the next morning. And every day you did. I didn't know what to do with that. I'd never had anyone be that consistent about me. He took out his phone. Nia watched him pull up a number and type a short message. He didn't explain what it was, but she'd find out soon enough. His lawyers would have it within the hour. The instruction to dissolve the redevelopment agreement and redirect his liquid assets into a community land trust, ownership structured to the residents, permanent and protected. He put the phone away. I told you I'd come back and marry you when I had money, he said. He almost smiled at how young that sounded. I've got the money. That part turned out to be the easy bit. He looked at the fence. What I actually wanted was to make sure no kid has to sit here the way I did. That's what the money's for. The trust, the buildings, all of it. The people who covered for you. Your father, the woman at the corner store, the baker. They never got paid back. I'm going to spend a long time fixing that. Nia was quiet for a moment. A car went past at the end of the block, slow, and then it was quiet again. I didn't know if you'd made it, she said. I thought about you sometimes. Wondered if you'd found somewhere warm. I found somewhere tall, Lucas said. Took me a while to figure out that wasn't the same thing. She looked at him the way she had in the community center, taking stock, making sure what she was seeing was real. Then she reached over and took the hand that was still resting on the fence wire. "The promise was never about the money," she said. "It was that you'd remember where you came from." "I kept the container," he said. 20 years in a safe. I think that counts." She laughed. It was short and genuine and cut right through the quiet of the block. They stood there for a while, her hand over his on the cold wire, the lights from the police cruisers long out of sight, the neighborhood making its ordinary night sounds around them. A window closing, someone's television, the distant hiss of a bus. The fence was still there. It was just a fence now. The morning was cool, but the sun was already strong by the time people started gathering. Lucas got there early, before the stage was finished, and helped carry folding tables out from the center. Nobody made a thing of it. Someone handed him a coffee and pointed him toward the heavier end of a bench that needed moving. And that was that. No SUVs today. He'd taken a car service and walked the last 2 blocks. The street smelled like taco grills, and someone's speaker was running old R&B from a second-floor window. Kids were already in the courtyard, ignoring the adults entirely. Where the chain-link fence had been, there was now a low stone wall bordering an open courtyard. Planters, a few wooden workshop benches, a mural still drying on the far side. The community center behind it had been repointed and cleaned. The decades of soot gone from the brick, the windows new. Near the entrance, a small brass plaque read, "The Reed Carter Community Trust." Lucas got up on the stage when they called him. He was wearing a linen shirt, sleeves already rolled. He looked out at the faces. A few hundred people, some he knew from the past months of meetings, most he didn't. 20 years ago, I thought a promise was something you kept with money, he said. I thought if I built something tall enough it would settle the debt. What I didn't understand, what I got wrong for a long time, is that the debt wasn't to an idea. It was to specific people. The man who worked nights at the garment factory on Paulson Street, so his daughter could pack an extra lunch. The woman at the corner store who adjusted her books and never mentioned it. The baker. The neighbors who saw a kid the system had already written off and decided that wasn't their conclusion to accept. He stopped for a second. This trust is theirs. The structure is permanent. The land doesn't get sold. The board is majority resident. That's not generosity. That's a debt being paid in the only currency that means anything. He stepped back and looked at Nia. She was standing to his left, same as she'd been standing beside him for the last 4 months of legal meetings, planning sessions, arguments with city officials, and late nights at the oak table going over documents. She was holding the plastic container. Blue lid, clouded sides, the hairline scratch across the top. They'd put it in a small glass case in the lobby that morning, at her suggestion. Let it be seen, she'd said. That's what it's for. She reached over and took his hand. You can stop carrying it now, she said quietly. Just for him. You're not paying anything back anymore. You're just here. He nodded. He didn't trust his voice right at that moment. They came down off the stage, and the crowd didn't clear a path so much as pull them in. Handshakes. A woman who wanted to tell him about her father's shop. A teenager asking about the apprenticeship program. Someone pressing a taco into his hand before he could say anything. He ate it standing up, talking to a man whose family had been on the same block for 40 years, who had a lot of opinions about the mural colors, most of them correct. At some point Lucas glanced back up the street, past the rooftops, to where the tower caught the light in the distance. From here it was just a building. Tall, sure. Narrow against the sky. He turned back to the courtyard. The container was in its case in the lobby. The fence was gone. The courtyard was full of people who had brought food to share without being asked, because that was apparently just what happened here, and always had been. Lucas finished his taco. Someone handed him another coffee. He took it.